And we'll kickstart this edition with some news just coming in at this point in time. And this is an India Today exclusive news break. Pakistan-China terror tango bleeds India. Top military sources have revealed their terror plot. Poonch terror push to divert India from the Ladakh matter, the Ladakh issue. Larger game plan by Pakistan and China to not allow India to ease out from Jammu and Kashmir sector and deploy troops on China border. India moved uniform force of Rajouri rifles in the Poonch sector to Ladakh to counter Chinese aggression in 2020 and put pressure on them to match Indian strength is what we are learning. These are details of the manner in which Pakistan and China tango, and this continues essentially Poonch terror essentially to push to divert India from Ladakh, a larger game plan by China and Pakistan to not allow India to ease out from Jammu and Kashmir sector and deploy troops on the China border. Manjeet Negi is breaking that down for us. Just talk to us a little about the tango of Pakistan and China and what their modus operandi, all this while essentially has been in terms of deflecting attention and also in fact confusing India in that sense. Manjeet.
Well, Pooja, as per the information given by the top sources, the Pakistan wants to go India to carry out action against especially the Poonch area, and the bigger plan is the larger game plan by the Pakistan and Chinese to not allow India to ease from the Jammu and Kashmir sector and deploy more troops in China border. And recently, India moved uniform force to Rajouri from Poonch sector to Ladakh to counter Chinese aggression in 2000 up to 2020.
We'll try and connect with Manjeet in a moment from now. Sources are telling us that 20 to 30 terrorists are in fact in the Poonch sector. India moved uniform force of Rajouri rifles in the Poonch sector to Ladakh to counter the Chinese aggression in 2020 and put pressure on them to match Indian strength. In fact, India was forced to do so to move the uniform force of Rajouri rifles on the Poonch sector to Ladakh to counter the Chinese aggression. Essentially pressure from both ends to compel India then to move the troops to the Chinese, to the Ladakh, in fact, region. In fact, near the border, near the China border, to deploy troops on the China border. India was compelled to move the uniform force of Rajouri rifles in the Poonch sector and divert the resources from the Poonch sector essentially to Ladakh, essentially to counter the Chinese aggression. And this was a tactic that China and Pakistan deployed, essentially to compel India to reduce the troops in this particular sector in Poonch. The Poonch terror push to divert India from Ladakh is what we are picking up. The plan was to in fact pressurize India so that it was in fact forced to divert the troops to this particular region in Ladakh, essentially at the China border, to counter the aggression from on the part of China in the year 2020. Essentially, this is from top military sources who revealed this sort of a terror plot that was devised by China and Pakistan together. This is essentially the Pakistan-China terror tango that is bleeding India, and this is an India Today exclusive news break. Top military sources reveal a terror plot. Poonch terror push to divert India from Ladakh. Larger game plan by Pakistan and China to not allow India to ease out from Jammu and Kashmir sector and deploy troops on the China border. India was forced to move the uniform force of Rajouri rifles from the Poonch sector to Ladakh to counter Chinese aggression in 2020 and put pressure on them to match Indian strength. 25 to 30 Pakistani terrorists have been hiding in the upper reaches of the Poonch Rajouri sector in the forested area to launch terror attacks on security forces, explaining why terror incidents in this region have in the last 3 years or so increased manifold. Pakistan started sending its own terrorists from Pakistan to the area, which are carrying out attacks against own troops to force redeployment of own troops in this area. India had recently moved in one more brigade to counter terror activities and have achieved success in delegating 20 plus terrorists, including all Pakistanis. Pakistan Army also wants to provoke India to carry out action against it in these areas in view of the 8th of February elections in Pakistan and to garner support to its own candidates is what we are picking up. essentially their tactics in this particular region in India and the Rajouri and Poonch sector, also in connection with domestic politics in Pakistan, where the army is intending to provoke India to carry out action against it in these areas in view of the February 8th elections in Pakistan and to cater to the domestic audience there. And we have news just coming in. This is an India Today exclusive news break. Pakistan-China terror tango bleeding India here. Top military sources reveal a terror plot. Sources say that Poonch terror push to divert India essentially from Ladakh. I'm going to hand it over to my colleague Shiv Arur, in fact, who's joining us with the very latest on that. An open secret really, Shiv, the manner in which India was in fact forced rather to move the uniform post of Rashtra Rifles on the Poonch sector to Ladakh sector to deal with the Chinese aggression there.
These details coming out, India Today's Manjeet Negi is reporting these very troubling details of a larger plan that clearly involves not just Pakistan, which we know has been directly sponsoring and involved in terrorism along the line of control, but China also being part of it. And the reason, like you just fleshed out, Sneha, is because the Indian Army basically has a limited number of units operating in Jammu and Kashmir, and as a result of the standoff with China that began in 2020, in May 2020, it needed to reinforce its standoff zones in Ladakh, and some of the units needed to be moved were chosen from south of the Pir Panjal area, which is the Poonch Rajouri sector, which was seen to be slightly more peaceful at the time post the abrogation of Article 370, and they were moved to Ladakh, creating something of a vacuum, a power vacuum in that particular area. Remember, the Poonch Rajouri sector has many crossing points between India and Pakistan occupied Kashmir, and therefore it wasn't really seen as a potential threat area, even though there had been infiltrations in that area in the past. But this has proven to be extremely detrimental because China and Pakistan have both seen an opportunity to reignite terror in that area. China sees great benefit in directly sponsoring terror in this area because they want India to pull back some of its forces in Ladakh as a result of the reactivated terrorism that's happening south of the Pir Panjal. The pattern here is very, very clear to see. The 4 soldiers who've been killed in the Thana Mandi area of Rajouri yesterday, it's the third such incident that's taken place just so far this year. Less than a month ago, on the 25th of November, 5 soldiers, 2 officers in fact, and 3 soldiers were killed not very far from this location. In May this year, 5 Special Forces soldiers were killed in action in a terror encounter here. So obviously there is a extremely targeted, organized, deliberate attempt to reignite the levels of violence in this particular area. And mind you, this is happening at a time when the overall levels of violence in Jammu and Kashmir have actually come down very drastically in the wake of the application of Article 370. So for it to be, consistently rising in the Rajouri Poonch area suggests, exactly what India Today's Manjeet Negi has been reporting from his sources, which is that there is an attempt to try and draw India to push its forces back from the Ladakh area towards this, so China can carry out its own, insidious military operations and military objectives in that particular area. So I think we're going to see much more of this. Election season is another compelling factor for the reactivation of violence in these sectors because it also is an attempt to make the government look bad, make the government look, incompetent, especially after the Article 370 verdict in the Supreme Court today. All of these tie together. China fully aware of the effect of such operations as well.
Shiv, I'm going to thank you for the moment for joining in with your perspective on that.